Welcome to the Hindu Daily.
Today, we've got quite a range of sources lined up for you.
We really do. We're looking at 5 major stories today, covering politics, history, science, tech, pretty much the works.
Yeah, drawn from the editorial, science, and text and context sections of the paper.
So let's just dive right in. We'll start with a really powerful piece from the editorial section, focusing on historical reckoning.
Okay.
This first article, it really gets into the whole Columbus myth, and it connects that history of colonization quite brutally directly to the kind of toxic immigration politics we see now, especially, say, in the U.S.
Right, the article highlights what it calls a grotesque inversion.
Explain that a bit. What's the core idea there?
Well, it's about how the basic human drive for dignity, for survival, the thing that's always pushed migration, is being twisted by modern policies, turned into this battleground of fear, exclusion, hostility.
Yeah, and it ties us back to how we were taught history, doesn't it? That critique of colonial ideology in education.
Exactly. Think about that classic essay question many of us probably had. What if Columbus had not discovered America?
Right. The question itself assumes his arrival was, like, inevitable or even necessary, a discovery.
Precisely. The article argues we are basically taught to admire the predator, never to mourn the prey. That's a direct quote, and it's pretty damning.
And the counter-narrative here is crucial. Look, the standard history often brushes over.
Yeah, that the Americas weren't some empty land waiting to be civilized. These were incredibly vibrant, complex societies. Think advanced farming, astronomy, sophisticated governance.
Like the Iroquois Confederacy?
Exactly. They had this really advanced democratic system, long before Europeans arrived. Some argue it even influenced the U.S. Constitution. So calling Columbus's arrival a discovery.
It was an invasion.
An invasion that led to genocide. That's the article's point-blank conclusion.
And you can draw a straight line from that, the source argues, to today. These settler colonial projects, they thrived on displacing people.
Right. And now, the powerful nations that grew from that displacement, they often obscure their own role in creating the instability, the wars, the economic pressures that force people to flee their homes today.
It leads to this kind of historical amnesia, which can have really shocking results. The article mentions a specific example.
Well, the Geronimo code name. Yeah. That's deeply unsettling.
Tell us about that.
Okay, so the U.S. military used the name of Geronimo, the famous Apache leader who fought fiercely against invasion, as the code word for the mission to kill Osama bin Laden. Operation Neptune Spear.
Wow. Just wow. Taking a figure of resistance against colonization and using his name for that.
It reduces him, this complex historical figure fighting for his people's survival, into a simple enemy or terrorist label. It's historical theft, really.
And the article argues this isn't just a one-off mistake. It's symptomatic of something deeper.
Exactly. It stems from that foundational Columbus myth. That myth became the sort of ideological blueprint, justifying centuries of, racial capitalism and white supremacy.
So it justified the plunder back then, and subtly, maybe unconsciously, it helps rationalize the barriers, legal, moral, physical, put up against migrants and refugees now.
That's the core moral paradox the article points to. Nations built by often violent migration and colonization are now working overtime to prevent or criminalize migration. It's a profound contradiction.
Okay, moving from that historical lens, let's shift gears slightly to economic history. Still in the editorial section, this piece looks at how understanding the past can help us navigate today's economic shocks.
Right. This one kicks off with a great little quip from Nobel laureate Joel Mokyr.
What was that?
He apparently joked that economic historians don't win the prize, which is ironic, right? Because their field is so relevant right now with huge disruptions like AI, massive inequality, geopolitical shifts.
Absolutely. So what's Mokyr's big lesson for us from economic history?
His core idea, and it's really important, is that modern economic growth is a social technology first and only then a mechanical one.
Okay, unpack that. Social technology.
Think about the Industrial Enlightenment. It wasn't just about one inventor having a breakthrough. It depended on what he calls civic machinery. Things like printing presses, making knowledge cheaper, coffee houses where people exchanged ideas, learned societies, even guilds initially. These things helped useful knowledge, practical know-how, travel, and spread.
That's fascinating. So it's the network, the ecosystem, that matters as much as the invention itself.
Precisely. And this connects really nicely with work by other laureates, like Aghion and Howitt, on Schumpeterian growth. Their models emphasize something called contestability.
Contestability. Okay, let's break that down. What does that mean in plain English? Why is it key for innovation?
It essentially means the system, the social plumbing, if you like, has to allow new ideas and new players to challenge the established ones. Schumpeter called it creative destruction, right?
Right.
Innovation stalls if the big established companies or interests can just easily block newcomers through lobbying, lawsuits, or capturing regulations. If it's too hard or too expensive for new ideas to get a foothold, the whole engine kind of sputters.
That makes perfect sense. And it feels like a really useful way to look at some of our biggest economic anxieties today.
Definitely. The article links this framework to three big ones.
Let's take them one by one. First, AI and the fear of job losses. How does Mucker's perspective help there?
Well, it pushes back against the simple idea that tech just kills jobs one for one. History suggests technology shocks tend to reprice skills and completely reorganize work. It demands new competencies, maybe different kinds of jobs, not necessarily fewer jobs overall.
So the policy response shouldn't be about protecting old jobs, but
Exactly. It should be about managing the transition. Things like portable benefits that follow the worker, not the job. Building skills bridges to help people adapt quickly. Supporting workers through that change, not trying to shield yesterday's companies.
okay. Second big anxiety, high public debt. Everyone's talking about needing austerity.
But economic history offers a different perspective. Fiscal sustainability isn't just about cutting spending. Molker studied the British and Dutch states, right? They became credible borrowers, able to finance big things long-term, not just by slashing budgets,
How
by
the
building strong institutions, credible, transparent tax systems, representative bodies that gave lenders confidence. That institutional strength is what really mattered for managing debt sustainably.
Interesting. And the third, anxiety, inequality.
Yeah, and here the history of guilds is really instructive. Guilds often claim they were just ensuring quality control or maintaining standards.
But really, they were protecting their members' privileges, limiting competition.
Often, yes. Privilege hiding behind reasonable-sounding justifications.
Mm.
The article suggests the modern equivalent is tackling barriers to entry in digital markets
How so?
through things like pushing for open standards so different systems can work together, using government purchasing power to favor competition, and clamping down on self-preferencing.
Self-preferencing, that's when a big platform like Amazon or Google promotes its own products over competitors on its site.
Exactly. Those kinds of regulatory actions are like the modern version of the coffee house or the cheap pamphlet, ways to ensure ideas and competition can flow more freely without powerful gatekeepers blocking the way.
So, looking back at economic history, it doesn't give easy answers, but it maybe protects us from, what, getting too excited or too depressed.
Yeah, the article concludes it's like a vaccine against both euphoria and despair. It reminds you that prosperity isn't the default state. It's something fragile that has to be built, institutionalized, and constantly fought for.
Okay, now let's pivot from economics to the environment, specifically the Himalayas. We're moving to the science section for this article on disaster mitigation.
And the timing couldn't be more relevant given recent events.
Absolutely. The article opens with those dramatic incidents, that sudden freak blizzard on Everest trapping hundreds of trekkers, and at the same time, deadly floods and landslides hitting Nepal and Darjeeling. It just highlights the extreme volatility of the region now.
Yeah, the danger level seems to be ramping up significantly.
The data cited really drives that home. There's a 2024 DTE report mention. It found that between 1900 and 2022, India had 687 major disasters. A staggering 240 of those were in the Himalayas.
Wow, that's a huge concentration.
And it's accelerating. The last decade alone, 2013 to 2022, saw 68 disasters there, the highest number for any decade in that whole period.
So what's driving this increase? Is it just climate change?
Pretty much. The article points to the climate context. The Himalayas are warming much faster than the global average, somewhere between 0.15 and 0.60 degrees Celsius per decade.
That's a rapid rate of warming for a mountain range that's already seismically active.
Exactly. It makes the whole system incredibly unpredictable with more intense rainfall, faster glacier melt, destabilized slopes, which leads to this dire need, as the article puts it, for effective early warning systems, or EWS.
Okay, so what makes an EWS effective in a place like the Himalayas? It's a vast area, 2,400 kilometers long.
Right. A glaciologist, Dr. Arga Banerjee, laid out some key requirements. They can't just be high-tech imports. They need to be indigenous, low-cost, definitely weatherproof,
And crucially,
easy for local people to actually operate and maintain. that local ownership is key.
But the tech challenges must be immense, right? Getting data out of remote areas with no mobile signal, maybe unreliable power.
Huge challenge. The systems have to transmit live data somehow. Despite all that, AI models can play a big role in crunching that data quickly into useful warnings.
But technology alone isn't enough.
No, the article really stresses the human element. Local communities have to be trained not just to maintain the equipment, but to understand the warnings and know how to react. Trust is essential.
Is there an example of where this kind of local integration worked?
Yeah, it mentions a case in the Swiss Alps at Blatten Village. A potential glacier collapse disaster was averted,
Yeah.
simply because a local shepherd who knew the area saw the danger signs early and made a phone call downstream. That quick human intervention based on local knowledge prevented a major crisis.
It really underscores the need for that human element.
It does, which makes the article's main criticism quite pointed.
What's the critique?
It argues that despite the clear and growing danger, these Himalayan catastrophes just aren't getting the priority they deserve. Not from scientists, engineers, funding bodies, or policymakers.
So the people living there urgently need these systems, but the support isn't matching the need. Is it complexity being used as an excuse?
That seems to be the implication, a failure of prioritization leading to continued neglect despite the escalating risks.
Okay, let's move to our fourth piece, from the text and context section. This one shifts focus to politics in Bihar, specifically the extremely backward castes, or EBCs.
Right, and the recent caste survey there threw up some really striking numbers, highlighting a major political puzzle.
What did the survey show?
It found that EBCs make up a massive 36% of Bihar's population. 36%. And if you add in the upper other backward castes, the OBCs, together they are 63% of the state.
That's a huge demographic block. So what's the paradox?
Despite that numerical strength or political representation in the state assembly, the legislature almost never gets above 10%. Massively underrepresented.
Okay, maybe we should quickly clarify these categories for listeners. EBCs, extremely backward caste, are like the most marginalized group within the broader OBC category, right?
Exactly. They're listed in Annexation of the state's classification, about 112 different castes, and it includes Muslim EBCs too, the Pasmanda Muslims.
And the upper OBCs in Annexure 2, those are the groups like Yadavs, Kurmis, Kuwaris.
Yes, the more dominant groups who really led the charge for backward caste political power, especially from the 1990s onwards. That decade was kind of the peak when backward caste MLAs finally outnumbered upper caste ones.
And who was central to that shift? The article mentions Karpuri Thakur.
Yeah, former Chief Minister Karpuri Thakur is seen as a key figure in ushering in this backward Raj. Two of his policies were apparently game changers.
Oh, what were they?
First, he removed English as a compulsory subject for the Class 10 exam. Big help for students from poorer Hindi-speaking backgrounds. Second, he started holding local elections back in 1978.
So focusing on the grassroots level.
Exactly. And that's where EBCs have actually seen more success, which contrasts sharply with their lack of power at the state level.
How so?
While later, Nitish Kumar's government in 2006 brought in the Bihar Panchayati Raj Amendment Act. This reserved up to 20% of seats in local government specifically for EBCs.
And that had a real impact.
Huge impact. Thousands of EBC leaders got elected at the village level. The source mentions nearly 1,500 mukhiyas, who are the elected village council heads.
Right. Mukhiyas are key local leaders. So real power at the grassroots.
Yes, direct participation. But then you look at the state level again.
And the numbers are still tiny.
Dismal. Between 1990 and 2000, the number of EBC MLAs was stuck between 6 and 16. Even in 2020, they hit a high of 29 MLAs, but that still only just nudged their share over 10%. Remember, they're 36% of the population.
So why is it so hard for them to translate those numbers into state-level power? Is it just fragmentation?
That seems to be a major factor. The EBC category is very heterogeneous. Most individual EBC JADIS, or subcastes, are tiny, less than 1% of the population each.
So no single EBC group has the numbers on its own. They need to consolidate.
Exactly. Numerical consolidation is key for electoral clout. The article gives the example of the Nishad community.
What do they do?
They managed to forge an alliance among about 22 different previously separate fishing and boating castes. Together, they reached nearly 10% of the state's population, suddenly giving them significant bargaining power.
A successful strategy, then.
It shows it can be done. But overall, the article suggests that most political accommodation for EBCs at the state level, like appointing the first EBC speaker way back in '67 or the first EBC deputy CM more recently in 2020, has been largely pretty much symbolic. The real grassroots empowerment from those local reservations is important, no doubt. But it hasn't yet led to the kind of broader economic and social upliftment needed for communities still largely stuck in poverty and precarity.
A big gap between local gains and state-level influence.
Definitely. Okay, for our final piece, let's jump into the tech world. Text and context again, this time looking at the recent AWS outage and what it tells us about cloud vulnerability.
Ah, yes, the US East 1 incident. That caused quite a stir.
It really did. A major outage in Amazon Web Services' biggest region took down services for literally thousands of companies. We're talking big names. Amazon's own retail site, ChatGPT, Signal, Fortnite.
It just showed how reliant, maybe dangerously reliant, we are on these massive centralized cloud providers.
So what was the technical cause this time?
The immediate trigger was a DNS error domain name system, specifically affecting the APIs for DynamoDB, which is one of AWS's core database services.
Right, DNS is like the internet's phone book, translating a website name into its actual address if that breaks.
It's like trying to call someone, but their number keeps changing, or is just unavailable. You can't connect, even if the service itself might technically be running somewhere.
And why is US East 1 in particular so prone to these issues? It's AWS's oldest and biggest region, but the article calls it infamous.
Yeah, it has a bit of a reputation. Even though AWS has multiple availability zones, or AZs, within each region, for redundancy, usually at least 3 separate data center clusters.
The entire US East 1 region seems susceptible to these cascading failures that take everything down.
Exactly. And because it is the default and oldest region, so many global services have dependencies tied specifically to it. So a problem there ripples outwards globally.
We saw that back in December 2021, didn't we? That massive outage.
Oh yeah, the one caused by a typo. Someone literally made a mistake typing a command during maintenance.
And it knocked things out for nearly 7 hours, costing major companies something like $150 million.
Right. No wonder some customers started calling US East 1 a systemic risk. The concentration of critical infrastructure there is just immense.
It really is a wake-up call about being too dependent on these few giant players, the hyperscalers like AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud.
Absolutely. And some of the fallout was quite unexpected, revealing deeper dependencies.
Like what? The article mentions George Oroz pointing out some examples.
Yeah, services like Postman, an API tool,
Yeah.
and 8 Sleep, smart mattresses.
Yeah.
Logically, parts of their services should have kept working locally even if AWS was down.
But they didn't.
Nope, they failed completely, which showed that the development teams had basically built them as pure cloud products with inherent dependencies on AWS being up. They'd made, as Ores put it, no prep for an AWS region outage.
Wow. So even things that seem local are fundamentally tied to the cloud mothership.
In many cases, yes. And looking ahead, the article mentions experts worrying these outages might actually get more frequent
Why is that?
because of the huge push towards AI. Integrating AI capabilities everywhere requires massive amounts of data processing, constantly feeding data into the cloud. This puts an ever-increasing load on these hyperscaler systems. More load, more complexity, potentially more points of failure.
That's not a comforting thought. So what did AWS say officially after this latest 15-hour mess?
Well, their immediate response was to disable the specific component, the DynamoDB DNS planner, that seemed to trigger the problem. And they committed to adding additional protections,
Which mainly means?
improving their internal testing, trying to catch these complex failure scenarios before they happen in the real world and, bring down half the internet.
The scale and interconnectedness are just mind-boggling. It makes you really wonder about building genuine resilience into systems that are designed for this kind of centralization.
It's a massive challenge.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.